I'm leaving you. I've found someone else, someone younger, Thomas declared with a smirk at our daughter's graduation celebration, his voice cutting through the room. The words felt like a sharp blow, and I saw the other guests freeze, their attention snapping to us. Lily's valedictorian speech had just wrapped up an hour ago, and here was my husband of 26 years, choosing this moment to tear apart everything we had in front of all our family and friends. I'm Emily Collins, 51 years old, and I'm a marketing director at Verdant Press, based in Denver. For years, I'd put up with Thomas's cruel behavior. His late nights, unexplained absences, and the obvious signs of his infidelities. But tonight, standing in my elegant navy gown, I didn't feel anger or hurt. Instead, I felt a calm resolve. "Actually, Thomas," I said, setting my champagne flute down with steady hands. "That's great timing. I have some news, too." My voice carried confidently, cutting through the whispers and shocked glances. "I'm leaving you for someone younger. Much younger." Thomas's smirk faltered for just a second before his expression twisted into something colder. "Don't be ridiculous, Emily," he sneered. "Who would want a woman your age? You're delusional if you think you can do better than me." I smiled, calm and serene, the kind of smile I'd perfected in countless boardrooms where men thought little of me. "His name is Jacob Harris. Perhaps you've heard of him. He's tall, intelligent, and charming. Your boss?" Thomas went pale, the color draining from his face so quickly that I thought he might collapse. His mouth opened and closed like he couldn't get a word out, and the self-assured arrogance he had radiated just moments before evaporated entirely. The room was silent now, and I could feel dozens of eyes locked on us. "That's impossible," he whispered, his voice shaky, but the fear in his eyes said everything. He knew exactly who Jacob Harris was, and more importantly, he knew how much power Jacob held over his career. Just then, Lily appeared at my side, slipping her arm through mine in a supportive gesture that filled my heart with pride. Lily, my 22-year-old daughter, brilliant and kind, had never inherited her father's cruelty. She had witnessed the way he treated me for years, and tonight, she was ready to watch me stand up for myself. "Dad," Lily said softly, her voice unwavering despite the tremor beneath it. "Mom deserves better than how you've treated her. We all know about your affairs. It's time for her to be happy." The room was completely still now, waiting for Thomas's response. I turned to face him, his pale face a mirror of shock and disbelief. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of satisfaction. The journey that led me here had been a long one, though I hadn't realized it until now. Thomas and I met in college, both ambitious marketing students with big dreams. He was charming, confident, and I was drawn to his certainty. We married young, had Lily 2 years later, and settled in what I thought was a good life in Denver. But somewhere along the way, Thomas's confidence turned into arrogance, and his ambition became cruelty. He began treating me like a mere accessory to his success, not a partner in our marriage. When I got promoted to marketing director at Verdant Press 3 years ago, instead of celebrating with me, he mocked me, claiming I was getting too full of myself. The affairs began around that time, or at least that's when I first noticed them. Late nights with the scent of perfume lingering on him, mysterious phone calls that stopped as soon as I walked in, credit card statements for restaurants I didn't recognize. I confronted him once and he laughed, dismissing me as paranoid. Lily knew, of course. Children always know more than we think. She had caught him in conversations with his assistant, had seen the contempt he had for me when he thought no one was looking. Last year, when she came home for the holidays, she sat me down and told me, "Mom, you're amazing. You don't have to stay with someone who doesn't appreciate you. I'm old enough to handle whatever you decide." That conversation had planted a seed that slowly grew over the next few months. I started paying more attention to my own needs, focusing on my appearance not for Thomas, but for myself. I began evening French classes, something I'd always wanted to do. I started rediscovering who I was before I was Thomas's wife and Lily's mother. And that's when I met Jacob Harris. He came to speak at my French class about global business communication. Jacob was 35, the youngest vice president at Ocean Ridge Enterprises, Thomas's company. He was also Thomas's direct superior. Though Thomas never mentioned that Jacob was running their division, everyone knew it. Jacob was everything Thomas wasn't: respectful, intelligent, and genuinely interested in my thoughts. When he invited me for coffee after class, I agreed without hesitation. When he told me I was the most fascinating woman he'd ever met, I believed him. He looked at me like I mattered. The connection that formed between us was built on respect and real affection. Something I had forgotten was even possible. The tipping point for me came 6 months ago, at Thomas's company's annual dinner. I had spent weeks preparing a presentation on cross-cultural marketing strategies for a global expansion, and when I walked in with it, Thomas humiliated me in front of everyone. I was eager to share my ideas with the other professionals in the room. But as soon as I stood to speak, my husband interrupted with a loud, mocking laugh. "I apologize, everyone," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "My wife sometimes forgets she's not really qualified to talk about international business. She works for a small publishing firm, not a real corporation." The room went silent, and I felt my face flush with embarrassment. But instead of backing down, I met the eyes of Jacob Harris, who sat at the head table with the executives. His jaw was clenched in frustration, but when our gazes met, he gave me a barely noticeable nod of encouragement. "Actually," I said, my voice steady despite the fire of humiliation inside me, "Greenfield Press just secured a $15 million contract with European distributors using the exact strategies I'm about to present. But maybe this audience isn't the right one for such details." I sat back down to polite, subdued applause, but the damage had been done. Thomas had just shown everyone how little he respected me, and for the first time I saw him for what he really was, a small, cruel man. Later, during the cocktail hour, Jacob approached me. "I'm sorry about what happened in there," he said quietly. "Your husband was completely out of line." "He's usually like that," I replied, surprised at my own frankness. "Would you consider having dinner with me sometime? I'd love to hear more about your marketing strategies, and I'd also like to discuss a potential opportunity with you." That dinner changed everything. Jacob shared that his company, Summit Ventures, was expanding its European operations, and they needed someone with my exact skill set to manage their new office in Paris. He also told me I was brilliant, inspiring, and beautiful, compliments I hadn't received in years. "I know your situation is complicated," he said as we walked to my car that evening, "but I want you to know you have options, both professionally and personally." The professional opportunity was an offer to become the European Director of Marketing, with a salary nearly double what I was earning at Greenfield Press. The personal side was more complex, but equally tempting, a chance to be with someone who valued me for who I was, not for who they wanted me to be. As Jacob and I grew closer over the next few months, I began to understand what a healthy relationship could be. He never spoke to me with disdain, never dismissed my ideas, never made me feel inferior. When I told him about Thomas's affairs, he didn't brush me off or call me dramatic. He simply held me and told me I deserved far better. Together we devised a plan. Let Thomas dig his own hole, and then let him fall into it. The weeks leading up to Lily's graduation required a delicate balance. Thomas had no idea that his boss was not only interested in him professionally, but personally too. Jacob and I were careful, meeting in quiet cafes across town, taking long walks in parks where Thomas would never think to look for me. But our connection deepened every day. I had never felt this way about anyone. Jacob told me one evening as we sat by the lake, "Age is just a number, Emily. What matters is how we connect, how we understand each other." He was right. Despite the 16-year age gap, Jacob and I had a bond I had never experienced with Thomas, even back in our early years together. We talked about books, travel, and our hopes for the future. He listened when I spoke about my work, offering fresh perspectives and celebrating my successes without jealousy or condescension. Meanwhile, Thomas grew more reckless. His affair with his 25-year-old assistant, Amanda, was now an open secret at Summit Ventures. They had long lunches, stayed late at the office, and Thomas had even been spotted kissing her in the parking garage. Jacob, as Thomas's supervisor, was keeping meticulous records of each inappropriate incident. "I won't lie to you," Jacob said during one of our evening walks. "Thomas's behavior is creating problems for the entire department. His work quality has dropped, he's missing important meetings, and the other employees are losing respect for him. I'll have to address it soon." But we both knew the real confrontation would come at Lily's graduation. Thomas had been hinting for weeks about major changes coming to our family. He was planning something big, and we were ready for him. Lily, of course, was part of the plan. My brilliant daughter had already figured out that I was happier than I'd been in years. When I finally told her about Jacob, she was thrilled. "Mom, you're glowing," she said during one of our lunch dates. "I haven't seen you this happy in ages. Whoever this man is, he's good for you." When I told her it was Jacob Harris, her father's boss, her eyes sparkled with mischievous delight. "Oh, this is perfect," she grinned. "Dad's been bragging for months about how important he is at Summit Ventures, but he never mentions that Jacob Harris is the one really running the show. He's going to lose his mind." The graduation ceremony itself was beautiful. Lily gave a fantastic valedictorian speech about having the courage to chase your dreams and never settling for less than you deserve. I caught Jacob's eye in the crowd, and he smiled. We both knew that Lily's words were meant for me just as much as for her graduating class. At the reception afterward, Thomas was in his element, playing the role of proud father and successful businessman. He had no idea that his world was about to come crashing down. I watched him as he worked the crowd, introducing himself to other parents with his usual air of superiority, bragging about his role at Summit Ventures. "My husband sure knows how to perform," I murmured to Jacob when he joined me at the table. "Not for much longer," Jacob replied quietly, his hand brushing mine under the table. "Are you ready for this?" I glanced across the room at Thomas, who was laughing loudly at his own jokes while Amanda clung to his arm like an accessory. I thought about all the years of humiliation. All the times he made me feel small, insignificant, and unworthy. All the nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering what I had done wrong. "I'm ready," I told Jacob. "Let's end this act." Thomas waited for the perfect moment, waiting until most of the guests had finished their meals and were casually mingling around the reception hall. He stood up dramatically, tapping his wine glass to grab everyone's attention. I recognized that look on his face, the smug smile of a man who thought he was about to drop a bombshell. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice booming with practiced confidence, "I have an announcement to make on this very special occasion." Lily shot me a concerned glance, but I squeezed her hand, offering her a reassuring smile. "We were prepared for this. Years ago, I married my college sweetheart," Thomas continued, gesturing to me with feigned sentimentality. "We've had a good run, raised a wonderful daughter, but sometimes in life, we have to make difficult decisions." The room fell silent, sensing something dramatic. I noticed other parents shifting uncomfortably in their seats, unsure if they should be witnessing this private moment. "I found someone who makes me feel young again," Thomas said, his voice growing bolder. "Someone who appreciates me for who I am and what I've accomplished. Someone who doesn't spend her time criticizing me or trying to compete with me professionally." I almost chuckled at that last part. Thomas had always felt threatened by my success, unable to accept that I was just as capable as he was. Amanda, standing beside him like a trophy, beamed with the confidence of someone who thought they had won some kind of prize. "So tonight, I'm announcing that I'm leaving my wife for someone younger," Thomas continued. "Someone who understands what a successful man needs in a partner." The collective gasp that rippled through the room was unmistakable. A few guests looked at me with pity, expecting me to crumble in front of them. Instead, I stood up slowly, smoothing out my dress, a calm smile playing at my lips. "How interesting," I said, my voice loud and clear, cutting through the silence. "I have an announcement of my own." Thomas's confident smirk faltered for just a second. He hadn't expected me to respond, probably thinking I would break down or beg him to reconsider. But I had spent months preparing for this moment, and I was finally ready to take back my power. "You're absolutely right, Thomas. 26 years is a long time to stay with someone who doesn't appreciate you, someone who treats you like you're beneath them, who belittles your achievements, and who parades their affairs without even trying to hide them." A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't going as Thomas had planned. "So I'm also leaving," I continued, stepping closer to him. "For someone younger, much younger actually. Someone who values intelligence over arrogance, kindness over cruelty, someone who sees me as an equal partner, not as an accessory." Thomas's face started to turn red, his earlier confidence replaced with panic. "Don't be ridiculous, Emily," he stammered. "You're 51. What man would want you?" "You're nothing. You work for a tiny publishing firm," I cut him off, speaking clearly. "Perhaps you know him. Jacob Harris. Tall, brilliant, charming. He's your boss, Thomas. Your direct superior at Summit Ventures." The room fell into stunned silence. Thomas's mouth dropped open, and I watched as the implications of my words hit him like a ton of bricks. Amanda looked around, confused, clearly unaware of the significance of what I had just revealed. "That's impossible," Thomas whispered, but his voice lacked any real conviction. He knew Jacob, and he knew exactly how powerful Jacob was at Summit Ventures. More importantly, he knew what this meant for his own career. "It's not impossible," I said softly. "Just surprising to you." The explosion, when it came, was dramatic. Thomas went from pale to bright red in seconds. When he finally found his voice, it came out in a furious roar. "You're lying!" he yelled, loud enough to make several people jump. "There's no way Jacob Harris would want anything to do with a woman like you. You're nobody. You work for a tiny publishing company." A calm voice interrupted from across the room. "Actually," Jacob said, standing tall from his table, "Emily works for one of our most valued partner companies." All eyes turned to Jacob as he moved through the crowd with an effortless confidence, his presence commanding attention in a way that Thomas's outbursts never could. "Greenfield Press," Jacob continued as he reached our table, "just secured a major international contract worth $15 million for our European operations. Emily developed the entire marketing strategy that made this deal happen." He paused beside me, not touching me, but standing close enough that his support was unmistakable. "She's also accepted my offer to lead our new Paris office as the European Director of Marketing. We'll be relocating there next month." The room erupted in whispers and murmurs. Parents who had just witnessed a family drama were now witnessing a professional power shift, as well as a personal one. Thomas looked as though he might collapse from shock. His face turned beet red, veins bulging on his forehead. "This is insane. You can't do this to me," he shouted. "I work for you," he continued, voice rising in panic. "Actually, you work for Summit Ventures," Jacob replied smoothly, "and your performance reviews have raised concerns for quite some time. Your supervisor, that would be me, has documented numerous instances of unprofessional behavior, declining work quality, and inappropriate conduct with subordinate employees." Jacob glanced pointedly at Amanda, who was starting to look less sure of herself. "I had planned to discuss your future here after the festivities," Jacob continued. "But since you've chosen to make this a public matter, maybe we should address it now." "You can't fire me," Thomas sputtered, his voice trembling with disbelief. "I've been with the company for 12 years. I have seniority." "Seniority doesn't protect employees who violate company policies, particularly when those violations create legal liabilities," Jacob replied coldly. Sophia, who had been watching this exchange, suddenly stood up and moved to my side. "Dad," she said, her voice clear and strong, "everyone knows about your affairs. Everyone knows how you've treated Mom. Did you really think you could humiliate her like this and face no consequences?" Her words were the final boost of strength I needed. I looked around the room at all the faces, some shocked, some sympathetic, others clearly entertained by the unfolding drama. I felt a rush of confidence I hadn't felt in years. "Thomas," I said, my voice calm and steady, "you've spent years making me feel small and worthless. You've told me I'm too old, too plain, too ordinary to deserve better treatment." I paused, letting my words sink in, "But you were wrong. Jacob sees me for who I truly am, intelligent, capable, and deserving of love and respect." I stared directly into his eyes, my satisfaction growing. "Tomorrow morning, Jacob and I will begin planning our move to Paris. As for you," I continued, taking a step toward him, "you'll be cleaning out your office and searching for a new job. I hope Amanda is ready to support you, because your days of living off your wife's patience and your boss's leniency are officially over." Watching Thomas's world crumble was sweeter than any revenge I could have imagined. The aftermath rippled through the reception like an earthquake. Thomas stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to grasp what had just unfolded. The confident, arrogant man who had tried to humiliate me was gone, replaced by someone desperate and lost. "This isn't over," he finally shouted, his voice cracking with rage. "You can't just destroy my life like this." "I didn't destroy your life, Thomas," I replied calmly. "You did that yourself with years of cruelty and infidelity. I'm simply choosing to stop enabling it." Amanda, who had been standing beside Thomas like an accessory, was now starting to realize the magnitude of what had just happened. "Wait," she said, her voice panicked. "You're losing your job? But you said you were important at the company. You said you made 6 figures." "I do make 6 figures," Thomas snapped at her. "This is just a misunderstanding. Mike, we can work this out. You're making a mistake. But Jacob wasn't even looking at him anymore. He was looking at me with such warmth and admiration that it made my heart flutter. Emily, he said softly, would you like to dance? I think we have something to celebrate. The music continued as other couples swayed on the floor. But as Jacob led me onto the dance floor, I could feel every eye in the room on us. I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt beautiful, valued, and free. You were magnificent, Jacob murmured in my ear as we danced. I've never seen anything more satisfying than watching that pompous fool realize his world is falling apart. Behind us, I could hear Thomas's voice rising in panic, still trying to convince Amanda that this was all some mistake. As Jacob and I danced, the weight of what had just happened began to sink in, not just for me, but for everyone watching. Thomas's carefully constructed image of success and authority had collapsed in front of his daughters, entire graduating class, and their families. The man who had tried to humiliate me was now standing alone, while his wife danced with his boss. The woman he had dismissed as worthless was now clearly the victor in this very public confrontation. Sophia approached us on the dance floor, tears of pride in her eyes. "Mom," she said, "I'm so proud of you. You were incredible." "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied, pulling her into our embrace. "I'm sorry you had to see that ugliness, but I couldn't let him hurt me anymore." "I'm glad you fought back," Sophia said fiercely. "He deserved everything he got and more." Across the room, I saw Thomas in a heated conversation with several other Summit Ventures employees who had attended the graduation. His gestures were becoming frantic as he tried to convince them that he was the victim of some elaborate conspiracy. But these were people who had worked with both Thomas and Jacob for years. They knew which man commanded respect and which one was just a middle manager with an inflated ego. Amanda was looking increasingly uncomfortable as the reality of Thomas's situation became clear. She pulled out her phone and started typing rapidly, probably texting friends about the unexpected turn of events. A woman who thought she was trading up for a successful older man was now realizing her prize was a soon-to-be unemployed man with no prospects and a destroyed reputation. The taste of vindication was sweet as I watched Thomas desperately try to salvage something from the wreckage of his evening. He had wanted to make me suffer publicly, but instead, he had destroyed himself, while elevating me to heights he could never reach. Thomas's downfall was swift and total. Within a week of Sophia's graduation, he was escorted from the Summit Ventures offices by security. His employment was terminated for violating company policies regarding workplace relationships and professional conduct. Amanda, who had been so certain about her future with him, disappeared the moment she realized he was unemployed and facing financial ruin. His reputation in Denver's business community was shattered, and he struggled to find work that paid even half of his former salary. The divorce proceedings were brutal. I had proof of his affairs, and our prenuptial agreement protected my assets. He was forced to sell his expensive car and move into a small apartment, a broken man who had gambled everything on his ability to control and belittle me. Jacob and I moved to Paris 3 months later, where I threw myself into my new role as European Director of Marketing with passion and success. The city embraced us as a couple, and I discovered that love in your 50s could be even more fulfilling than young romance because it was built on genuine understanding and mutual respect. Looking back on that night at Sophia's graduation, I realized that Thomas's cruelty had given me the greatest gift of my life, the motivation to finally claim the happiness and respect I deserved, and the satisfaction of watching a bully face the consequences of his own actions. That was my story. And even now, a part of me is still living in that moment. If you've ever been through something like this, or even if you haven't, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done. And if this story meant something to you, go ahead and subscribe. You never know. The next story might change how you see the world.